My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm a realtor in South Central Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And the purpose of today's video is to give you the market update for what's going on in the MatSu Valley. Now, the MatSu remains a very unique market, specifically here in Alaska. There's a lot of things that sets it apart from the neighboring market over in Anchorage and Eagle River. We'll get to that in just a minute, but before we do get started, make sure you give this video a like. If you haven't done so already, do subscribe. And let's go and jump into today's market update, looking at the residential, the condo, and the multifamily market, and we'll tie it all up in a bow for you in the summary. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is the residential market, and on the residential market, the first thing we need to check out for that to kind of gauge the health of the market is what's going on in the inventory. So we're seeing that there's about 281 properties were unavailable this time last year. For the month that we have the most current complete information, which is in December. And what we see is that for this past month, what we saw is it went from 281 to 257. So a little bit of a drop in the inventory, not a whole lot of a drop in inventory though, compared to what we see in Eagle River and Anchorage. Next, let's take a look and see how many properties have actually sold. So for the previous month, the year before, there were 202 properties that sold. For this past month, there was 221 properties that sold. So again, we're seeing a little bit of an increase in the number of properties that sold, even though we're seeing a little bit of a decrease in the number of properties that are available. So more or less, the market's staying at kind of an equal level, equilibrium. Equilibrium? There we go. Equilibrium. The next thing that we see is that the average sold price has definitely increased in the MatSu Valley for the year to date. For example, we saw this time last year, the average sold price was about $301,000. Now it's about $348,000. So that is a 15.5% increase in the average sold price in this market. And that's a pretty big deal. That'll kind of send shockwaves throughout the entire market. For those of you who aren't selling, that still has some implications. We'll talk about that in the summary though. Next, we're going to take a look at condos. Now, I've said this a million times before. It feels almost tongue-in-cheek, kind of ironic and cruel to do an update for what's going on in condos in the MatSu Valley just because there's so few of them, but they're there. It's going to be probably a growing sector of this market, so we're going to continue covering it. So what we see is that the number of condos that were available for the previous month, we have the most updated information, was 4, and the number of properties that were available the year before was 4. So not seeing any movement in the inventory for condos in the MatSu Valley. The next thing that we see is that the number of condos that actually sold in this market went from 4 the previous year to 7 just a couple months ago. So this can come down to any number of things. It could be a developer that just came out with a lot of condos and they were all able to sell at about the same time. It really is, when you have such a small market like this, there really is a lot that can throw it off. But yes, proportionally, I'm seeing a nearly 100% increase for condos that have sold in the MatSu Valley. The next thing that we see is that the average sold price went from roughly about $177,000 to about $190,000 year to date. That is a 7.7% increase for properties or for condos in the MatSu Valley. Pretty significant. Again, it's going to come down more to the area, the association that it's in, what dues are covered, is it in a desirable area, all that good stuff. But still a pretty favorable indication if you're selling a condo in the MatSu Valley. Let's take a break here real quick. For those of you who've been watching for a while, you do know that I actually do have a seller guide for people who are considering getting their property on the market and are just trying to figure out what exactly goes into this process of getting your property sold and how much work is it. So I do actually provide that seller guide, no charge for you. Do feel free to reach out to me on my website, and the link for that is going to be down below. Just make sure you put seller guide in the little comment section so I know what to send you, or feel free to reach out to me through Facebook or Instagram as well. And without further ado, let's go and jump into what's going on in the multifamily market in the MatSu Valley. Now, for the MatSu Valley, for the multifamily, we're seeing that there were 27 properties that were available overall for the entire MatSu Valley this time last year. Now it's been cut down to 17. So obviously seeing a pretty sizable cut in the inventory for multifamilies. Wasn't a whole big market to begin with though. The next thing that we see is that the number of properties that have actually sold in the market for the previous month, we have the most information for that's actually complete, is December, and we saw the year before 12 multifamily properties sold in the MatSu Valley. For this past year, it was 10. So seeing a bit of a decrease in the number of multifamilies that are selling. Not a huge difference though. That's about what we would expect if we're seeing that huge of a cut in the number of active properties that are available. Last but not least, we see the average sold price increase by 10.01% year over date. So we saw that the average sold price for the year to date was about $421,000 this time last year. Now it's about $464,000 if I recall correctly. So we are seeing an increase for the sales price for properties that are multifamily in the MatSu Valley. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we are seeing a sizable increase in the rent, which is a good indication. For a number of years, rent has kind of been stagnant, hasn't really gone up very much, which is great if you're renting. Not so good if you're the landlord and you have to pay for the cost of increasing utilities and property taxes. So let's go ahead and talk about the summary though. On the residential side, market does continue to look pretty favorable if you are a seller, which is good. That's healthy to a certain extent. I am seeing we do have more inventory out here proportionally than what we're seeing in Anchorage and in Eagle River. So that's awesome. And the reason that's really good is you're not going to see these stupidly overpriced properties that are still getting the light of day just because there are no options like what you have in Eagle River or Anchorage. No joke, saw a property that was $40,000, $50,000, obviously overpriced in Eagle River, still getting offers. So that's absolutely ridiculous. And once you start getting into a market like that, it actually becomes dangerous because mostly the pressure is on first-time home buyers in that price range. In the MatSu Valley, the average days on market for properties that are about, the 275, 300,000 range is 11 days. That is blistering fast. And it actually does increase up to about 23 days once you get to about 375 to about 450. So you see, once we get past that price range, becomes a lot more manageable. Now, the reason that I'm kind of counseling a lot of my buyers lately, hey, let's avoid the first-time home buyer price range, let's buy a little bit higher, is because I'm way more confident you're going to get what you're actually paying for when you go up to that higher range, because there's way less competition there, way less emotion, and quite frankly, way less people who couldn't qualify for a loan without the low interest rates being what they are, getting in there and succeeding at nothing but driving up the price for everybody who are actual contenders. As soon as the interest rates start going up, I suspect that is going to start drawing back a little bit. They'll start dampening the demand, which is good because you get a market that's appreciating too quickly and bad things can start happening. My concern for the people in the first-time home buyer price range is that they buy a property, it's way overpriced. In the heat of the moment, the appraiser comes back, they're not really willing to adjust it, $30,000, $40,000 back to where it should be. And that buyer is ending up stuck with that property 3-4 years longer than they wanted to because essentially they're underwater. So that's what I'm concerned about for people in the first-time home buyer price range. And that's not the case for all the price ranges in the MatSu, but it's definitely something we do need to be aware of. So if you're a buyer, still a good time to buy. Interest rates are really low. Just make sure that we get you a property where it's not so overpriced that you have to dig yourself out of it for years and years and years afterwards, because we bought it in this very small block of time where there wasn't a whole lot of inventory. Not convinced a lot of those properties are going to sell later for what they're selling now when there's no inventory. Once inventory starts going up, I'm not really expecting those prices to stay quite at that rate. They might, I could be wrong. I'm not expecting them to though. If appreciation is going to go up, the rate at which they're increasing is going to go down. So I'm kind of rambling at this point. So sellers, great time to sell. Make sure you take advantage of it. Interest rates are going up. That's going to start decreasing the demand from buyers, which in turn is going to start reducing your options for selling the property later. Now, if you are looking for condos, it's kind of good news there. Market's a little bit smaller. You are going to be paying a little bit more. Interest rates, again, kind of makes up the difference. If you've got a multifamily property in the MatSu Valley, then this is probably a good time to be looking at selling if you've been considering it to begin with, just because there is a 10% increase in the average sold price. And the reason for that, like I said, is mostly because of rents. And the MatSu Valley is kind of appealing to investors because the property taxes are so much lower in the MatSu as opposed to what they are in the municipality of Anchorage, because, the borough, MatSu Borough, actually has a more fair tax system than what they have in the municipality of Anchorage. So that has been your update. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me either on my website. You can find that in the description section down below. On my Facebook page, Instagram, I'm going to be coming out with a podcast interview in just a little bit with a pretty high-performing loan officer who runs one of the biggest loan lender companies here in town, and we'll talk about interest rates and how that's going to impact people moving forward. So do be looking for that, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.